it's for you. And a friend who understands everything you're going through. You keep standing at a distance in the shadow of your shade. There's a light of hope and shine. Won't you come and take your place? Bring it all to the table. It's nothing he ain't seen before. For all your sin, all your sorrow and your sadness, there's a Savior and He calls. Bring it all to the table. And He can see the weight you carry, and the fears that hold your heart. Through the cross you've been forgiven. You're accepted as you are. So bring it all to the table. It's nothing he ain't seen before. For all your trials, all your worries and your burdens, there's a Savior and He calls. Bring it all to the table. Bring it all. You can bring it all. Everyone sing with us. Come on in, take your place. There's no one who's turned away. All you saints, come right in and find your grace. Come on in, take your place. There's no one who's turned away. All you saints, come right in and find your grace. Bring it all to the table. It's nothing he ain't seen before. All your sin, all your sorrow and your sadness, there's a Savior and He calls. Bring it all to the table. So there's a coincidence brewing here that I didn't even know was happening. Jamie's talking about bringing somebody up for a testimony every now and then I don't know, it's just funny how you get to studying on something, thinking about what you're going to talk about, and then the thing that God puts on your heart, it somehow just boils up through everything that's been going on. So I'll start this off. Last week, not the weekend, but 2 weekends ago, I was in a pretty special place up in Yellowstone Park. And grandbaby's here.
Just let him play.
And I had an idea of what I would speak about this weekend after Jared had asked me, and it was kind of a theme that went like, we were going to go to Genesis 4, we were going to talk about Cain and Abel. Right? It was like the religion of Abel and the faith of Cain. And then I was going to kind of take Cain's reaction and take it to Matthew 7, verse 6, where casting pearls before swine. And then I I was going to wrap it all up in Romans 12:2 and talk about don't let your mind be conformed to this world. That was the plan. And I'd actually talked about that plan as we were hiking in to this place I was going in Yellowstone. And the guy I was with, David Rock Charlie, he's like, man, that's awesome. How you put all that together? Like, I don't know, I'm just smart. And
I love it.
so went into this place that we went to, and pretty amazing place. Won't get into the details, but it's this cabin that was finished in 1920. It was built by a man and a couple other families, the Bliss family and a couple other families, and it's virtually been untouched since then. Outside of putting a light in there where you can see, and a couple of commodes where you don't have to go outside and use the bathroom. I woke up one morning, I don't know, it's like my internal clock changed up there. And normally can't get me up in the morning, or if you do get me up, I'm a 5-ish kind of person. Amanda can test for this. I tell her all the time I'm setting the alarm, and she looks at me and she goes, really? Because you're just going to keep hitting that button. But up there, my wake-up time became 3 in the morning. Like, I just woke up at 3 in the morning. And little bitty rooms, like closets for bedrooms. I mean, it's just like you'd have built a house back then. The windows are still the windows that were in it from 1920 some odd when they were putting them in there. So it's like looking through the water, just to look through the glasses. And I woke up at 11 a.m. and I'm in a room with another guy, and like if you get up, the whole thing shakes. But I looked outside and my bed was right up against the window, and I had no idea what I was seeing. It was like Christmas lights is the way, but I couldn't get a good picture of it because I was looking through this glass, and I'm like, well, I got to get up. I'm up anyway. I got to get up and go see. And can I get up without getting this other dude up? I don't know. I'm getting up. So I got up and come through, and there's only 2 heat sources in the house. There's a fireplace in the kitchen that they cook on, and then there's one in the living room. And it was 30 degrees in the morning up there. So I get up, put some clothes on, I go outside, and I see the sky. And it was incredible. And I thought to myself, good Lord, right? I wish everyone could see this. And I thought to myself, I said, we'll go get my phone, right? I'll get my phone, we'll take a picture. And God stopped me and he said, well, I say God stopped me. He said, don't you take a picture of that. He's like, your phone can't create what you're seeing. It can't recreate it. He said, you need to give a testimony of it. And he said, I've put minds in the hearts of my children that can generate what you're seeing, but your phone won't show it to them. When I tell you that it was as black a sky as you could come up with, and there were millions and millions of stars just shining, as blinding shining. And in the middle of it was the Milky Way, and you could see it. Like it was like somebody had taken a paintbrush that was half full of dark blue, light blue, purple, green, and yellow, and just went across the sky with it. And those stars were coming through there. And as I sat there and I looked at it, I said, okay, I'll describe this the best I can. I thought, testimony. All right, let's talk about testimonies when we go to the church. Cool place. I'll give you a little bit of history. The chair that I was sitting in at the little desk beside a window up in a nook in the living room was a place that J.P. Morgan had sat and studied before. It was a place where John Rockefeller had sat and studied before. It was a place where Teddy Roosevelt had sat and studied before. So just being engulfed in that history, in that untouched place, it was special. And it led me off of where I was going to be and into what I wanted to talk about today, which is testimony. Before I get there, I met this man in 2005. His name was Dale Southwell. He was from Mansalona, Michigan. And Dale was a Baptist man from that part of the country, and devout and hard on his beliefs and things like that. But his dad, as a gift to his children, and Dale had several siblings, brothers and sisters, his dad had sat down through their life and written stories about the proof he had that God was real, and about the other little things that no one would ever remember. And he put all this together in a book called Tall Trees and Tall Men. And he published it in hardback and then gave it to his children. Now, if you go looking for the book, you're going to find Tall Trees and Tough Men by Robert Pike. That's not the book. This book's a very unpopular book. But I asked Dale to give me a copy of that book, and he did. He had his dad sign it, and I read it. And I thought to myself, good grief, what would I give to read these stories written by my dad? Regardless of the content, like to get that insight of what my dad would write if he was trying to pass on the stories he thought were important. So that inspired me to start doing the same thing. So back in around 2006, 2007, I started emailing myself little sentences and things like that. And there's a ton of stories that are getting compiled in this little, I'll call it a book or a memoir or whatever that I'm writing. But a lot of them that are in there are testimonies. Now, what's a testimony? A testimony is a first-hand account, whether it's spoken or written, that's evidence or proof that you have about the truth. It's different from hearsay. Like the testimony I'm telling you about today, if you tell somebody else about that, that's hearsay. What's your testimony? So when I think about testimony, there's a part of the Bible in Revelation that stands out to me that I think about all the time and I often quote when I'm talking to people. But it's Revelation 12, and we're going to go 1 through 12. And try to use your imagination when I start saying these things. So it starts in verse 1. It says, "A great and wondrous sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun and with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth." Think about that. Like I looked on the internet and found some images that have been made of that. What a scene. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his head. And his tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that he might devour her child at the moment that it was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all nations with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the desert in a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But the dragon was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. And then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, "Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of your God, and the authority of his Christ. For the accusers of our brothers, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down." So God, the devil's an accuser. "They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you in the heavens, and you that dwell in them. But woe to you on earth and the sea, because the devil's down there with you. He's filled with fury because he knows his time's not short." Because he knows his time is short. So when I look at that and I think about how they won, how they overcame him. They overcame him with the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And I take this story and I look at our current day today. And I say, so how does the blood of the Lamb and the word of the testimony play? To me, the blood of the Lamb rights the wrongs. Right? That cleans the slate for you. And then the word of your testimony and the proof, your spoken or written account of what God's done in your life prevents deception. Because that's what the accuser's doing down here right now. He's trying to deceive you. He's trying to make you believe you're not good enough, you're not what you are, and he wants to trick you into going down roads and doing things that you shouldn't do. So I think about a testimony, and I got to reading where's a good testimony in the Bible before I get to one of my own here. So John 9, 13 through 25. I'm going to read it again. So this is the blind man that Jesus healed on the Sabbath that the Pharisees had such a hard time with. So they brought the Pharisees the man who had been blind. Now the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes was on the Sabbath. Therefore the Pharisees also asked him how he received his sight. Well, he put mud on my eyes, the man replied, and I washed, and now I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But the others asked, how can a sinner do such miraculous signs? So they were divided. So we got a problem here, right? Like we got this miracle that happened, it was on the Sabbath. Some of them don't like that it happened on the Sabbath, but some of them were like, well, who else could do it? So they turned again to this blind man that had been healed, and they said, well, what do you got to say about him? It was your eyes that were opened. The man replied, he's a prophet. The Jews still did not believe that he had been blind, and they received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. And here comes the first testimony in here. They said, is this your son? Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it now that he can see? So in verse 20, they testify and they say, we know he's our son. That's a fact. The parents answered, and we know that he was born blind. Those are just facts. No interpretation, no opinion on that. It says, so they say, but how can he see now? Or who opened his eyes? We don't know. Ask him. Parents said, we don't know. You ask him. He's of age. He'll speak for himself. And his parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews. You know, it talks here about getting kicked out of the synagogue. If Pharisees went against you, they kick you out of the synagogue. Back in that day, it wouldn't be like here where I get mad at Miss Virginia and say, you got to get out of the church. She just goes and finds another one. If the Jews were kicking you out of the synagogue, that meant you were banished. Like nobody was going to have anything to do with you. So that's why the parents said, he's of age, ask him. A second time, they summoned the man who had been blind. They said, give glory to God. They said, we know that this man is a sinner. And here's the second testimony in the story. The man says, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. What I do know is that I was blind, and now I can see. When I look back, with Amanda, we were sitting this weekend, and I pulled up this Word document I've been looking at, and I looked at my own testimonies, and there's a lot of stories in there, some that aren't necessarily related to God, just here's a stupid thing you did that I just don't want you to forget. And then there's other stuff in there that is directly related to God. There's a visit from my brother, Adam Jackson, that's listed out in there. He passed away the year he graduated. There's a story that he's listening, and I've told that to this group, or a lot of people in this group, when Brother Marion showed up at my house one morning after a call out to God. There's a story about spirits in my home. There's a story about the child's baptism and Jamal, the lumberman, showing up at my house and knowing exactly what was going to go on and how did he know. There's a story in there about Donate Now and this money that needed to be given to liberate this woman who was trying to get out of a terrible situation. And we had no idea about any of that. There's a story in there about a mud engineer's son who this mud engineer had forsaken, and we talked and prayed about it, and this boy came back to that father. There's a story in there about Chris Welch's baby, where a wife that couldn't get pregnant, and we prayed, and she got pregnant. And then there's a story that I'm going to share today, Christopher's in here, about baby chickens and Tractor Supply. So, before I get into baby chickens and Tractor Supply, I just want to say that remembering the work of God in your life helps protect you from the enemy's deceptive work. And it's very important to know your testimony and to tell it, and to practice telling it. It's proof for the people that hear it, and it's accountability for you to walk like someone who's seen that kind of thing. So, I don't have notes on the baby chickens and Tractor Supply, but I know the story because I was there. So, it was me and Amanda and Christopher. I don't remember if Grace was there. She wasn't. I thought it was just the three of us. And we went to Tractor Supply one night to get some stuff. Now, there was a time in my life where I could go and I could hang out in Tractor Supply for an hour, just looking at nuts and bolts around us. Just loved it. Well, I'm doing my thing, looking at nuts and bolts. And Christopher, I guess, maybe was 10 or 11. He was young. And he comes to me in the nut and bolt aisle, and he says, Daddy, if a chicken needs to be healed, will God do that? And if he will, how you do it? And I'm like, well, we don't know nuts and bolts, but let's go over and take a look. So we went to the tub of the baby chicks over there with a heat lamp on them, and Christopher shows me this chicken, this baby chick that's deformed in a terrible way. It can't walk. It's like its legs, instead of being on either side of it, were like one before the other. And the other chicks were pecking at it and just being really, I mean, imagine baby chicks and the kind of cruelty that can go on there. And Christopher's like, we need to pray, the chick needs to be healed. And I'm like, I don't know if it works that way, son. Just not sure about it. And I'm like, but you know, that's a sad thing. And I go back to my nuts and bolts. So we do what we need to do, and we get in the truck to leave Tractor Supply, and we're coming out, going by the fence where all the fence posts and stuff are. And Christopher throws a fit and says, just wait 1 minute. It ain't right. This is not right. Like, if I was in pain and I was getting picked on and that's the kind of thing was happening to me, you wouldn't leave me there. And we have got to go back and deal with this. And it was like closing time. It was like getting close to 9 o'clock. We had left just about closing time. So it was then that my boy had set me straight, right? I'm like, gosh, he's killing me. So I back up, pull back up at the front door of Tractor Supply, and I'm like, going in to get the chicken. And Amanda stays in the truck. And I get in there and I'm like, y'all don't think I'm crazy, but there's a chicken with a deformed leg back here in this thing, and the other chicks are pecking at him. We want to buy that chicken. And they're like, we know the chicken you're talking about. Like, we've seen that chicken, feel bad about that chicken. So they get a box, and we go back to the thing, and we examine every chicken in the thing. And deformed chicken anything. I mean, we looked 5 and 6 times because they're digging for it. They're happy somebody's going to get it. We've just seen it. And I think Christopher knows what happened. I think he prayed for that chicken. And a blind faithfulness that can only come from a child.
That's right.
And it was healed.
Amen.
I don't have any other way to explain it. And then in Romans 12:2, it tells you to be careful, don't. When you get to see those kind of things, don't try to normalize them, right? Don't say you didn't see what you saw, right? This is a testimony. This is a real account of a thing that happened that night, and it was incredible. And I wrote it down here, and I'll tell you that in every one of these testimonies, and a lot of you have heard the one about us in the boat, about crashing and the water going still. That was real too. And in every instance, in every testimony that I've been a part of, that I've seen firsthand, there's this desperation. There's this calling out. There's this belief in what God can do against what the conditions are showing you. And then there's this thing that's coming to fruition right before your eyes. For the men in here, or for the women or the children, you ought to be writing that stuff down. Somebody ought to find it one day and read it as proof of our God. I was having a conversation with a young man yesterday, long conversation, one I'd been wanting to have for a long time. And we were talking about the weight that people carry, and if you're not walking with God, if you don't know Him, if you've normalized out the things that you've seen as coincidences, or it just couldn't have been, or I must have misunderstood. Like if you don't have that kind of relationship, and you've got this past that you carry with you, and you've got these terrible things you've seen or you've done or you've been a part of, you can lay all that down if you haven't. God sees you right where you are. And He doesn't see behind you. All He sees is what can be. And what a beautiful thing He's done for us to give us the ability to lay that down and not know that person anymore and not agree with that person anymore. How beautiful it is. Miss Debbie, could you come play a song for me? So as we think about today the testimonies that we have, I can tell you as somebody who back in 2005 made it my business to start being able to tell the testimonies I have. Talk to your family about them, practice them, say them, tell them. Verify with the people involved they're true. Like make sure you can get some alignment on what really happened and tell that story. So as Miss Debbie starts to play here, if you want to come forth and pray, if you want to just come up and talk to God about a testimony you've had, if you want to make that decision that you want God to see you where you are today and not look back beyond